All right, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Trek Talk with Tech, Kirk, and Handy. This time is LARPing. How's it going, everybody? I'm Techman16.
I am Strange Kirk.
No Handy. He's LARPing.
He'll
Let's
probably
welcome
he'll
back.
probably jump in once he gets his coffee going or something.
Sure. Yeah. Welcome back, Occam's server 45 represent. How you doing?
Standing. Pleasure to be here as always.
And then we got your admiral here, Zarseem. How you doing today?
Hey, I'm just living the dream. How you guys doing?
Living the dream. What does that mean? People say that. What does that mean?
You know what? I've said it for decades. I don't know. It usually starts a conversation better than saying, "Hey, I'm good."
So what does it mean?
I think it means something different to everybody else. That's the beauty of it. You get to decide in your own head what it means.
Yeah.
Oh,
Some people that walk to work every day dream of, being able to use a moped, and if they get one, that's their dream. There you go.
And I dream of server-wide wars. So, everyone has their own dreams.
Oh, well.
You-
Oh, Jesus.
oh, jeez. You dream of server-wide wars,
Something's got to spice things up.
but you lived them, didn't you?
Yeah, we've had a couple of them.
So did you start them?
No, I think OCM and I and a few others over here, our philosophy is we don't start them, but we certainly finish them.
That has been the case.
Usually. So what's it like being Occam's, leash holder, I guess?
The first step is you can't use one of those small, PetSmart, dainty Rachel Ray leashes. You need a military grade harness. So that's the first step is you got to find the right leash.
Okay.
Anyone who's ever been in the military would know that the military grade just means it's going to break faster.
Yeah, probably.
So is that the reason why he's always blowing everybody up? Because you're buying shitty military contract equipment?
Yeah, but I get a cut on the back end, so it's just like how it works in the real life.
There you go.
So who makes the leashes?
I'm not sure. What do you think, OCM? Which leash am I allowed to use?
It's the Klingon brand.
The Klingon brand. Made by
Does it come with nipple clamps?
Yeah, but don't tell him that. I saved that for my own enjoyment. Now that he knows, he's going to want them.
All right, guys. Thank you for everyone coming to episode of Talk with Tech and Kirk.
Thought these were heart monitoring devices all this time.
Yeah, it's that good Klingon technique of measuring heart rate through the nipples. So is it like a 3-point where it wraps from behind up underneath and then it clamps to the nipples? Is that how that works? And then it breaks?
This one's got some it's got some bling to it. Like I can't exactly decide how it's all supposed to come together, because there's jewels. It even lights up for the holidays. Like this one's a fancy one.
Where did you get that one?
I can't divulge this source because we start getting in more private life type stuff.
And how often do you hold it tightly?
It depends on the day. I think you always want to keep people on their toes. So some days it's tighter, some days it's looser. But the idea is to always keep it spicy and interesting.
When was the last time you just let it go?
I try to do it. You can usually tell. You can usually tell when the dog just needs to hunt, and so I don't. It's not on a set schedule, but I'd say usually once a week or so, once every couple weeks. The pit bull just needs a little bit of a hunt, and you let it go for a bit, and then you pull it back in.
And
A pit bull. As I said, pit bull. Does that mean Occam's short and wide with a fat head?
More than likely, yes.
2 out of 3. 2 out of 3.
It's like,
which two? Now I'm curious.
I ain't short.
he's short, but it's thick like a wheel of cheese.
Just don't show that wheel of cheese to Baxter. It'll be gone in a second.
Coming at you with a tuna can.
All right, so you let the dog off the leash like once every couple weeks. Like, what happens when the leash is off or when the leash is loose?
In all honesty, not too much. And we've got some players who need that, and rarely are there problems that result from it. I think people are just generally too scared to fight or to complain about it. But it's usually never a problem.
So Occams, what do you do when the leash is loose? Do you just go around and blow up a system, or what's the deal?
Well, I don't really like to fight people in STFC as much as I like to break their will. So usually when I get a full head of steam over something, nobody did something to me. Usually that pretty commonly rolls off my back. I'm like, whatever. I'll tell them that was unwise, and they'll get it. But if you fuck with my guys, girls, yeah, I'll go on a rampage against your entire alliance. Don't mess with my people.
You know what? I know what the people want to hear. I'm calling it. I'm going to say that if Server 34 went to war with your server, we'd kick your ass.
You guys have had a year longer than us. We got
justify it however you want to justify it.
We got a couple of guys that aren't ready to handle Incho yet, but they're getting close. So it'll all come down to time. Fight for a day. But we don't fight for a day. We're like, all right, well, let's resume negotiations next Christmas.
Scopely, if you're listening, we want an event, and I promise you that the vast majority of our active people who spend even a little bit amount of money would totally pay $10 or $20 if you could set up a battleground so we could do this. We'll pay money.
Yeah, but more than like just one system, where some stupid PvP event where you're like, go in this system, and if you want, you can pew pew. Like it's gotta be a real war.
We're doing this.
Honestly, I think a whole lot of people are waiting ever since they hinted at this being a thing that might be coming. Everyone's waiting for this. I mean, not everyone, but I know in our server, like there's a lot of bored people, and there's a lot of hope on this server, cross server, or inter server, whatever you want to call it, to give us some get that blood flowing again.
Well, if you listen to our show, we discussed it before. We talked about how cool it would be as if you could have, some sort of system, and you could have these special warp tokens, and you could go to this different map or whatever. You know what I'm saying? And you could bring a ship there, and PvP or whatever, but make the rewards like super awesome. You know what I mean? And like you would get loot chests from beating people, but like make it something that's worthwhile. I
mean, not one Findra shard.
No, but like something that's worthwhile. Your epics or something like that, and the reward would be like, you beat this person. Your reward would be like something outrageous, like, oh, here's 4, 5, 6, 7, 800 ultra recruit tokens or something. You know what I'm saying? Something that would be cool. They'll never do it, but it's awesome to pretend.
I mean, it's kind of what they missed on that only one event where. Like give them a title. Like somehow in game you actually get a title for something like this. Like I think people would fight for that. Like the only one was great, and I'm gonna brag a bit. I won it for my bracket. The shards were fine, but like I don't know, something that I could go around and be like, yeah, I won that only one event, and I spent I did like 200 and some odd armadas to do it, or 300. That's great, but like a title or I guess you could just have yet another frame or yet another avatar, but something like that I think people would fight for.
Dude, I'm not spending billions in repair costs to get a freaking avatar. It's not happening. I tell you this, I've won one avatar ever, and that was when they first came out with the Spock avatar, and for 24 hours I almost didn't sleep. I was grinding hostiles, and I was so proud of that avatar for like a year and a half. And it's the only thing, because I just don't have that kind of time, man. I'm not, nothing against anybody that has that kind of time, but like I'm not retired. I got a family. I own a business. Like I just don't have that kind of time to dedicate to just grinding hostiles. But my thing is, when they first started talking about the cross server events, they didn't really say much. They just said, some cross server events, and you're like, what? This has great potential. And they're like, everybody's gonna kill hostiles, and then whoever kills the most hostiles is gonna win. I'm like, okay, that fucking sucks.
Yeah. I mean, it's highly likely that what will happen is they'll give us like 1% of what we want, and then it will end up being go to the other server and mine their nodes.
It'd be something. It'd be lame. I don't think they would ever let you go into someone's actual server. I think they would find like a third, like like some sort of a neutral place that you would go to, and the battle sector or something, and maybe there would be nodes there that you can mine, and lat nodes that go for millions per second, or something, whatever. I'm being outrageous, but
This just reminds me of Stargate SG-1 when O'Neill met the Asgard for the first time, and they're like, "Your species has great potential," and then we're like, "We're still so much better than you. Go back to your own little corner of the world." And that's kind of like Scopely. It's like, "You players have great potential. Now go mine G5."
I can't hear. Whenever someone says Asgard, I can't help but think of that Thor movie where it's what's his name is on the planet with the gladiators. I can't remember his name. The actor. Damn, he's got his own show now. The quirky, funny guy.
Oh, you're talking about Loki?
No. The guy where he was like, oh, he shoots sparkles from his fingers or whatever. He's making fun of him and shit.
Rock guy?
No, the guy that runs that world. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Thor.
No, I know who you're
planet,
talking about.
Yeah, the planet they end up, and I can't think of the actor's name. But every time
You're talking about Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum, yes. When Jeff Goldblum, when he's like from Asgard, he goes, did he say Asgard? An Asgardian?
Life finds a way.
Anyway, Tech, whatever. What else you got?
Anyway, yeah.
Well, so you asked about OCM, and I want to tell one of my favorite OCM stories from the last war. It might have even been the war before that, but I was definitely a much smaller player at the time, and we're those people who are dumb enough to take Lat Rush seriously on Mondays. So we're mining away, and some player has the misfortune of trying to bully our players off of nodes and not let us mine, and OCM gets wind of it. And so he flies into the system and cracks this dude's base without it even hurting at all. Which is fine, whatever. A lot of players will do that. But this is the difference between OCM and everybody else. He then flies in like every 10 minutes for literally the next 18 hours and cracks this dude's base every 10, 15 minutes. Like that's what OCM was saying, where if you screw with his guys, like he's not just going to blow up your ship. He's going to make your life miserable. And this dude was just constantly cracked. And he refused to relocate, which I'll give him credit for. But he was basically just cracked for 18 straight hours.
Do they not have shields on your server?
he just kept repairing.
Yeah. So that's when I started calling him the Shark. I know he's got other nicknames, but the Jaws theme as he entered the system would always play in my head.
So would the guy get fully cracked the whole time? Like your ship wouldn't blow up at all?
No, he was a little overmatched. So that was the thing. He was picking on guys that were smaller than him, and he thought he could get away with it. And I was busy doing something, and I see the chatter in AC, and I'm like, all right, I gotta get a ship over there and take care of this. So he saw me coming, and he ran for his base. So I just fucking nuked it. And then I noticed that he immediately repaired his ship. So I nuked it again and again. I kept he wanted to have a battle of wills.
Shout out to Dentarth from Server 34 who tried to raid me last night while I was online, and I let him blow up his pylum several times, and then as soon as he busted out he decided to raid me with a Hydra, so he got that repair bill as well.
That's an expensive repair bill.
I feel like there's something. I feel like it's more satisfying to play possum and let someone blow up all their ships and then get, basically nothing, than it is to raid someone and clean them out. I don't know. That's just more to me. I get more of a kick out of that.
Oh my god, that's why I play possum all the time.
So
But people have gotten wise to that, so they just don't even hit my base anymore.
they learn, like people learn, right? Like you learn the people who are going to play possum. You learn the people that you're not going to raid. Like there's some people on the server who pretty much, for the vast majority of other players, I mean, these particular people, excuse me, could pretty much stay perpetually unshielded, and most people aren't going to touch them because they know the dude or chick or whatever is always near their phone. They're always around, and word gets around enough times, and you'll see it in some of the ACs. They'll be like, "Oh, so and so, all the ships are home and the shield's down." It's like, it doesn't matter, dude. They're just gonna wait, for you to waste all kinds of resources and then just repair, and then they're just gonna keep doing that. They're always around.
Grand Admiral Q is actually pretty good at that.
We have a number of people like that, but if you keep trying, every just once in a blue moon, they're not by their phone, and when you do crack them, it's pretty enjoyable. The feeding frenzy.
Yeah, it's a risk. It's a risk to reward ratio, though, because people like that 99% of the time will get online, and 99% of the time they'll get online long before you can even recuperate what you've spent in repair bills. So, I mean, it's cool, like if that's just a bragging rights thing, like how I caught you with your pants down. But for me, I look at it for someone who's like a budget player nowadays, very budgeted. I always look at like risk to reward ratio. Same thing with some people, that are at my level. Shout out to Cook. Cook loves, he loves grinding with his Valdor. He likes it. He loves the ship and everything like that. And he's pushed it so far now, where he's kind of got himself in a position where he almost has to use it because his jellyfish isn't a high warp, and he can't get there and blah 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 blah. So that's one thing. But like for example, for me, I look at what's the lowest power ship that I can complete this particular thing with, because that's going to net me the best profit, because my repair bill is going to be so low. Which is one of the reasons why I'm out there grinding, level 47s and so forth with an auger, because it's so cheap, and so that's me. That's the way I approach it. I approach it in that manner, trying to look at what's the least amount of effort that I need to put into this, to maximize the returns on whatever the reward may be, whatever the encounter may be. Which is why you still see people that are running around with maxed out Enterprises and D4s that are tearing up some of these lower level G4 ships. Repair bills a lot cheaper. They still hit hard. It's the best bang for your buck.
I still use a Legionary to grind because it does Federation damage. Anyway, Zarseem, tell us some more funny stories about Occams.
More funner stories. All right, so you guys are talking about high level G4, G5 ships. I'm a level 41 at the moment, so I'm not at OCM's level with the ships and the power. But this last war, when it started, my favorite part was flying into territory battles during their takeovers, and I had OCM on one wing. And we just tear the system up. And there's nothing that makes you feel more powerful. And at that time, I was probably mid-30s. There's nothing that makes you feel more powerful than a level 50 on your wing flying into the system. It's the first time in my life I think I flew in feeling like that big of a badass, where it's like everyone's going to run. You tell yourself they're running from you, because they're clearly very, very scared of my Burrell. But, they're not. But we'd fly system to system. And I know OCM remembers. I don't remember how much PD I got in a single day, but it was incredible. But OCM, I don't know if you remember how much PD you got in a single day, but it was ridiculous.
The epic HTP WS war. I got 157 million PD in the first 24 hours.
Yeah, and it was almost exclusively in territory. I mean, we just and a lot
It was
of
a good day.
A lot of these territory alliances, Most of them, I mean, we had a whole system, we had a whole process. We had trained our players on where to be, where not to be, what to do. Half of them listen, but the half that do, put you in a good spot. Most of these alliances that we were going up against, they were bigger alliances, but they hadn't done that level of work. So all their ships are just like in a row, or in a ring, which is just amazing. You just start at one end and just boom, 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 all the way down the row, and nobody can touch you. It was a lot of fun. I pine for those days.
So they got smarter, I guess, when trying to take over, or
No, which is why they don't have territory anymore.
makes sense.
I mean, no, I don't think a lot of these alliances put in the level of thought and effort, or have the level of, I don't know, life experience behind it, or I'm not sure, but we'd have trainings and practices, and we'd guide our players, tell them where to go, and teach them the best strategies for a lot of these battles. And there were a lot of times where we could have won on power alone, but we didn't. We put in place strategies, and we were able to win just on being smarter and more, better communication, better planning, going into it. And But yeah, I mean, my favorite was, I'm the 50th strongest player in that system as the fight's going on. But you got OCM and our buddy THC and a couple others flying in, and I'm just I can picture myself trying to hold on to a capture node, like you're in a raging river, just desperately trying to hold on while these guys are blowing up ships around you.
So you practice in your own TCs? Is that how you did it?
Yeah, we'd early on, especially, we'd practice on our own captures. We had a few trial runs, where we kind of you make it seem like you got a battle. We had always had the intention of having like a friendly come in and actually try for a takeover so we could practice, and that was on the docket. And then we immediately jumped into a real war, and we didn't need to do that. We just did it for real. But I think the key was the planning and communication. Like every player knew where to be. We had a TikTok on timing, so everyone knew at 7 minutes to, this is when this group goes here, and at 3 minutes to, this is when you do that. And you know how this stuff works. You got a bunch of people who maybe half are going to follow, but if the other alliance has no plan, at least you got half your people on a plan. And by the end of the takeover, more of them will follow suit because they'll see what they're supposed to be doing. And yeah, it tended to work. I mean, we had the advantage of better planning and being a stronger, overall alliance. But I think it would have worked even without the additional strength. I mean, especially early on, it was us versus multiple alliances. I think we were number one, but we were against 2 and 3. So you can't say that we completely overpowered them. By the end, through diplomatic work and others, we were able to beat them on size too. We had other alliances within it, but at the beginning, we definitely did not have the power advantage. It was a planning advantage.
So then what's life like now?
I think my answer would probably get me in trouble, but boring as hell. I think that a lot of our former enemies have joined up. They've just kind of realized there's no point; it's not worth it. And as one of them said, actually straight up to us when we said like, "Hey, we need a war. It's kind of boring," and they're like, "Yeah, you're victims of your own success. You've won too many and too strongly that no one really wants to challenge you." And that's why I think a lot of people are hoping for that inner server war or battle, because there just isn't anybody on the server currently who would challenge us, let alone could challenge us.
Yeah, I need fresh hate.
So I think it's time to take the leash off OCM again. We need to spice things up.
What are you going to direct him to do then?
Well, anybody who knows OCM is you don't direct him to do anything. So I'll just take the leash off and hope that he hope he goes the other direction instead of going in from my house to tear up my furniture.
So he's going to go rogue and terrorize your own alliance? That's going to be
No,
interesting.
nah, he wouldn't do that. No, I'll tell you what. That's part of why, Scopely. I don't think. Well, there's a lot I'm sure we could talk about that they don't understand. Starts with not playing your own game, but we've talked about doing like scrimmages between ourselves and possibly between allies, but we can never get it off the ground because like these are your brothers in war. Like you really have no interest for a PvP event for a day, fine, but like every time we've tried to put together war games or these scrimmages, like no one's interested in it. Like you don't tell a contract killer or a real killer like, hey, we're gonna go practice. Like they're only gonna get up when it's real. That's the only thing that's gonna get them excited. And frankly, they don't want to blow up their brothers. So just none of that has really gotten anybody interested or excited. It sounds great on paper. Let's do war games, but someone who's been in real war has no interest in war games.
Outcomes, what do you say?
No, he's right. I'm the guy. Every time they would pitch war games, I was like, meh. You know, I mean, really, at this point, we've had so much warfare. We don't, you don't need to do crew testing. So that's not even really a thing. So, it just doesn't have the emotional component. Like I said, I don't, I don't, I go out of my way not to try to victimize anybody in the game to, beat on them just to beat on them because I'm more powerful. But anybody that steps to us, I take great delight in showing them the error of their ways, messing with our alliance and breaking their will. It's harder to get into a war with us than people realize on our server. But they have learned the hard way that it's much easier to get into one with us than it is to get.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely part of the secret of our success. Is you may be able to hang with us for 12 hours or a day or two, but um, we win by our strength of will, and we will grind you down. That's definitely part of how we've been able to be successful. And in some of the previous wars where we weren't necessarily favored by power, we won by strength of will, and some of those things dragged on for months. I mean, I know our last war was months and then some. So I mean, it's not just having the biggest, the strongest ship. It's the strength of will and being willing to stick with it. That 7 day bubble lasts for 7 days. So if the war goes for 1 or 2 or 3 days, then you get a little bit of PvP and then you just go on with your life. Like if you're gonna make it hurt, it's got to go way beyond that 7 day mark.
And we recruit for that. We have a culture that we have established, and just because you have a high ops level and big ships doesn't necessarily mean that you're a good fit for us. We have, you know, there's a lot of people that would not like to be in alliance for server or other servers. They're like, nah, that's just not my kind of play, and that's cool. And but we find those people that is their stuff, and we can all move in the same direction, and that's where a lot of work comes from. Everybody on the same page, same mentality.
And I think some of that too is trained. You find the players. They don't have to necessarily be big PvP players right away. You find them that have that potential. I think that's one of the things that we've done really, really well is find players with potential and build them up. I mean, I know when I was recruited in, I didn't understand war. I didn't understand PvP. I was a Farmville player, and I was recruited right in the middle or right at the beginning of a big war. And I complained nonstop. The guy who was the admiral at the time sometimes likes to tell the story because I bitched and moaned about it. But they people invested in me and taught me, and people like OCM and others, taught me the fun that could be had in that style of play. And I didn't look back. The guy who taught me, I now have triple his PD. But I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. I think we find those players. They don't necessarily have to have high KD ratios or high PvP or PD stats right away, but you look for people who have the potential to do so, and you teach them, and some will come through, some won't. But if they've already got established stats, those are players that are harder to recruit. And I think one thing we've done really, really well is find mid-level players, sometimes even low-level players, and foster them and build them up. And most of we've got multiple alliances. We call them fleets at this point. And within that structure, we've got a lot of homegrown talent, people who started here in the low 20s, and we've taught them the way to play. And we've taught them to be killers, and they're relentless. So I think it's you don't necessarily have to find that person who's top 5 already on the leaderboard. You're looking for people who have the passion and want to grow, and giving them a friendly environment like this to do so really helps bring the best out in them.
So how then did you become admiral if you were recruited?
So I've probably been within this structure for other than maybe a handful of players about the longest. I'm definitely homegrown in this alliance. I was recruited in my low teens or mid teens, but I just worked my way up. I started as just a passionate player who knew how to mine and nothing else. But learned the game, learned the skills, and then stepped up in a minor leadership position under one admiral, and then was in the leadership team of the next admiral, and then was vice for the next guy, and then took over after that. So it was really just stepped up. But really for me, and what I advise a lot of our players is find that thing you can do the best and go do that thing. Life is full of people who try to be good and average at everything, and you don't stand out. You need a differentiator. So whether you're an alliance or a player, I always say find that thing that makes you stand out. Because if you're the best at something, then people will talk about you, and you can build up a reputation, and you can build off of that. But if you're good at a lot of things, you don't stand out. So I found that area that I could help the alliance that would be beneficial, and just pushed hard on that and did what I could, and it gets you noticed and makes people realize they can count on you.
So what happened to the admirals that you were talking about before you became one? Did they leave the game, or did they go somewhere else? What's the deal?
Yeah, one left the game. We love the guy, and we try to remind him on Discord once a week that he should come back. One moved. So at the time we had, back then we were two alliances, and our alliance was the redheaded stepchild alliance. Even though we were, on paper, quote unquote, supposed to be equals. When we came in, we were 30th or 30s in power on the rankings, and our other alliance was number one. So it was not equals as much as we tried to pretend like it was. And the admiral at the time wanted to move up to the bigger alliance so he could do bigger armadas and have fun with getting that support and bigger raids. So he moved up, if you will. And then the guy who was my partner, he's still leading one of our fleets. He's still one of our guys, and one of the best people you'll ever know, Crane. So he's still leading one of our fleets at the moment too. So each person had their own story.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah, the turnover in leadership is also that's an also interesting source for a lot of alliances, whether they get broken or made in the game. And I know on our server we've had when there's a change in leadership, usually it's accompanied by um, a fall of the alliance. Not so much anymore because you could change admirals in any of the big alliances and nobody's going to care because the alliances are more monoliths than they are, based around the people. But Kirk, you remember the times where people changed leaderships and then the alliances just fell apart?
Yeah, I think it probably has something to do with just the direction that an alliance is going. Then you change leadership, and then they want to change other directions, and they're like, "No, I don't like that. I was used to the other shit," and so they moved on, broke up, created new alliances and stuff like that. I mean, we have alliances that are still somewhat active now that used to be powerhouses, but now, I mean, they might as well be one of those little free to join alliances because they don't really do anything.
I mean, that's what happens when it's the same thing in sort of the real world with companies or organizations, where if it becomes a cult of personality, where it's about one player who's the leader or a couple players, then you're really dependent on those players still sticking around or still being passionate about the game. But if you want to build something that lasts beyond that, you can't have it be about one player. I think that's part of why we've been able to be so successful is, yeah, we've got really strong personalities and people who are really well liked, or at least maybe not liked, but respected, like OCM. But at the end of the day, it's about the culture we've built. As I said, there was a time where, when this alliance was started by the guy we call our fleet admiral, way back in the day, it was at the bottom of the power rankings. It's been built up over time. And part of how we've been able to do that is by having a culture that people want to be a part of, and it's more than just about one person or a couple people. I can disappear if I have to for real world stuff for a week and come back and everything's still humming along because you build an institution where people are empowered and people lead, but there's not just one person that everyone's all like, ooh, I want to play with so and so. Like you're part of something bigger than any individual person.
So how does it work if you decide to leave for a week?
It's only happened a couple times where I've had to leave for extended periods if I'm out of the country or what have you. But like I said, we've really built out we take it seriously. We built out a leadership structure. People have positions and defined roles. And honestly, people step up. I mean, that's the cool thing is you got people like OCM and others who, they want to play. They want to have fun. And so I know part of my job is to do the grunt work and the stuff behind the scenes so that other people can have fun and play the game. But they know that and they respect that. So if I need a break or if I need to step away, they're more than willing to step up and step into that role. And because we've worked hard to find capable people in those positions, they step up and everything moves just as well, if not frankly better sometimes, than when I or someone else might be leading that. So I think it's, if you take it intentional, where if I asked OCM to do spreadsheets every day of the week for a month, he's not only going to quit the alliance, he's going to quit the damn game. So you got to put people in positions where they have skills and, where at least they have some level of interest. And make it fun, don't make it work. I mean, people are playing this game as an escape from real life. So if you're asking them to go in and do data entry or go in and deal with, too much drama, which unfortunately there's always drama, but the more you can keep it fun and keep it from being a job, then if you need them to step up for a week or two, take on an extra couple hours a day in leadership, they'll do it. So I think it's just don't burn them out too early or too much on a daily basis. Try to spread out that workload if you can.
What's wrong with spreadsheets, Occams? What's the deal, man?
I'm a hunter, not a gatherer.
You can't light a spreadsheet on fire or attach a explosive to it. So,
And I can beat somebody to death with a spreadsheet, but it's just inefficient.
How would you beat somebody to death with a spreadsheet?
Preparation, training. Primarily, I would use an ambush.
With a spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Like you're going to email the spreadsheet for multiple accounts once a day?
No, I would print it out. I'm going to murder somebody. I'm going to have the common decency to, go hands on. Otherwise, it would
Okay,
just be rude.
So you're going to print out the spreadsheet and
Absolutely.
forcefully whack them with the spreadsheet.
Absolutely. You got to roll tight. You got to roll very, very tight. Get some structural stability, get a cylinder going, a little bit of heft.
I guess in that.
So it's really the paper that he's going to take you down with. It's not the spreadsheet; it's the paper.
Right.
It's kind of like beating somebody up with a spoon. Like you want to know that you can do it. It's just a pride thing.
I guess you could light the paper on fire.
Seems like a little more OCM style. It reminds me of the Alan Rickman quote. I'm gonna cut your heart out with a spoon. What is that from Robin Hood?
Yeah.
Just like a pride thing. Like you can. I'd probably need a nuke to take somebody out in real life, but having people around you like OCM who could take you out with a spoon or a spreadsheet or a piece of paper, it makes you feel stronger. I used to I go to baseball games with a buddy of mine who he was built like a Mack truck. He was, at most 5'4", 5'5", but he was round and massive. It was all muscle. Well, not all muscle, but it was mostly muscle. Just this big, imposing dude. And nicest guy you'll ever meet, but he looked scary. So we'd go to baseball games and we'd purposely sit in the opposing fans section. And there was a time where the Yankees were in town, and we sat in the Yankees section, and we just heckled the whole time. Because my favorite thing to do would be to heckle and have someone in front of you who's drunk, like start screaming at you and turn around and then see him staring at them and go, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Can I buy you a beer?" That's kind of how I feel having OCM around.
Yeah, Yankee fans get rowdy.
You can step out a bit and they're not scared of you, but when they realize who you're with, they go, "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. Would you? Can I buy you a pack?"
What Zar was saying about our leadership team, one thing that I think we do different than I've seen other alliances is organically, the people that we promote up that have grown up in our alliances. That a lot of alliances, they just promote somebody because it is that cult of personality. Hey, this guy or gal's real popular, or they're real powerful, or they're real active. So they promote them, and then they do that a few times, and then they have this portion of their leadership team that isn't really doing anything. Nobody knows what they're supposed to be doing. And so our thing is, we don't promote somebody and then find them a job. We promote somebody to fill a specific role.
Yeah, I think it's a great point.
And so, it's not like there's these individual fiefdoms that the various Commodores, oh, I can't do that, the other guy does. But we know, like if a player says, hey, I need XYZ, or hey, what's our ratio of donation for our ally and for our TC bank, and be like, oh, well, this guy handles that, so either go ask him or I'll ask him, I'll get that information for you. And we always know who, hey, this guy heads up this guy heads up that, so on and so forth. But then also, if that guy isn't available, it's not that the job's not going to get done. It's like, oh, that guy ain't online, and we need this done semi expeditiously. Anybody in the leadership team will be, all right, I'll handle that.
Yeah, and I think the what you can fall prey to is promoting somebody because like they're actively, they talk a lot, or they're fun and you like to play with them. You end up creating a clique, and then suddenly you start alienating players rather than bringing them up and inviting them to be more active. We promote for skill, even if they're not big talkers. I mean, I know one of the main guys who keeps our alliance going. His name's Darkshift in game, and he's a workhorse. And honestly, we wouldn't exist without him. But he's not someone that's going to keep AC rolling. I mean, he's fun like a lot of other people, but that's not his main thing. We got another guy, Icon, who I don't think he speaks more than once a month, but he does all of our event tracking and handles a ton of things behind the scenes. And you never hear from him. So I call him the silent assassin. You can't just promote just because people are fun or you like to play with them. Because you need people to fill serious roles that you need to be able to rely on them and trust them. But yeah, on the flip side, we also take keeping AC moving as a specific role. We've got somebody on our team who's here for a lot of reasons. He's a great player, a guy by the name of Jilted, who he keeps AC going. He's fun, and people like to talk with him and play with him, and he keeps everybody having fun. You got to think about what are those pieces of the alliance that we need. If it's all business, if it's all events, or it's all what is your ranking on this, or why aren't you doing better in that? No one's going to enjoy it. So you got to think about what are those parts of the experience that is going to make players want to be here and want to stay here, and how do I fill those positions and those roles?
Kirk, weren't you part of Alliance that also had players that had specific roles?
Yes, everybody did. The Commodores and the leadership team did have specific roles and things that they would do.
How was that?
It didn't work for me. And one of the reasons why is because in the real world, everybody has a role in a job or an organization, and you're required to be there at such a time. So there's a consistency in scheduling, So if everybody was all hands on deck, everything worked smoothly. But not everybody's online at the same time. So there'd be some sort of a complaint, and I wasn't the one who was supposed to handle complaints. But then I'd end up handling a complaint, and then you may have 2 or 3 other people that end up trying to handle the same complaint, because people are impatient. They'll just start PMing every person who's listed as a Commodore and complain, and you end up having 3 or 4 people that are actually doing the same work in tandem without knowing about it, and or in parallel rather, without knowing that the other people were working on it as well. So it's just chaos. It just really was. So one of the problems that I see, in my opinion, for example, my role was basically relations. I was supposed to be talking to people. It was more like the ambassador type thing, and so the job wasn't to handle every little, oh, this person hit me on this node and I wasn't 0, or I wasn't this, or that's not what I was meant to handle. I was meant to discuss things with other leadership, try to come up with solutions and things of that nature. I didn't handle those little complaints. So it just became very chaotic, and it got to the point where there was so much, bickering as far as the leadership positions, that I just decided to leave the alliance, and it's nothing against those people. I mean, the all of them. Well, most of them were good people. Some of them were pricks, but it was just that I didn't care for that. I didn't like that system. It just in theory, like I say, it works as long as everybody's around and everybody's able to do it. But you eliminate one of the links from that chain, and the whole thing falls apart. And so, with communication and so forth. So, honestly, to me personally, I feel like the best way to have it is in the leadership of an alliance. You really don't need more than maybe 3 or 4 commodores, and then you have your admiral. It's like the old saying. I'm pretty sure it's not PC to say it, but they would say, "Too many chiefs, not enough Indians." That old saying. You get too much leadership, and you got an alliance of 75 people or whatever, 80 people, and you have 15 to 20% of them are commodores. That's stupid. That's outrageous. I think it's silly. That's way too many people. And it's just unnecessary. And then the more people you have, it just gets more and more and more and more and more and more confusing. So I say all that to say, I don't think it's a great idea. I've seen it, and like I say, it ends up devolving into chaos over a period of time. It may not be initially, but there will come a point where it's just Jesus Christ. It gets crazy.
Yeah.
So
Kirk,
how do you guys deal with that?
Yeah, I think Kirk's got a great point. I mean, we've certainly seen how this structure can be done poorly. So I think a couple things on that. One, you want to make sure that you don't have too many cooks in the kitchen, if you will. If we're gonna, well, I'll use my own cliche to follow up Kirk's. So there are defined roles and specific people who are part of a leadership team who make decisions at a higher level, and you keep that Commodore level low. I mean, I definitely. Goodness, 15, 20 Commodores would be ridiculous. I don't know the exact count of our Commodores. I think it's somewhere around, if you count every position, 7 or 8. So we're definitely a little leaner than that. But I think there's 2 key things that really help avoid those problems. Number one is we use premiers as sort of that initial step into leadership. And so people who want to be in leadership earn a spot as a premier, and then they're an assistant to somebody who is the Commodore. That way, when someone is not available, let's say we've got our territory Commodore, and they're not available at the specific time for that takeover. Well, their assistant, their premier, can step in and take over for them. Or you got a hit complaint and your diplomacy Commodore is not available. You've got a premier who can step in and help with that. It's not perfect, but it does allow for people to have real lives and they're not going to be around 24/7. So you kind of allow for that, but it also allows for that continuity because people want to move on, whether they want to shift to a different alliance or fleet, or they just don't want to be in leadership anymore, or God forbid they want to quit the game. You already have that next person who's been groomed, who knows what the refine ratio is and how we handle takeovers because they've been the premier, they've learned, they've been trained. So I think that's the first thing you do. And the second thing, to be honest, it's at the top. Your admiral has to recognize that their job, that the phrase is servant leader. Like you're there to help everybody else. So it's not my job as admiral to have everybody talk about how great I am and walk around saying, "Look at my ships and look how important I am." It's to fill the holes. So. If OCM has a specific role that he covers, and he's out for a week for whatever reason or a couple days, like my job is to step in and help out. Or if I've got a Commodore who's busy in work or maybe just burned out a little bit, I'm going to step in for him for a couple days, give him a break, and do it quietly. It's thankless work, but I think a lot of people look at leadership in game similar to how a lot of people look at leadership in the real world, where if you haven't been in that role you think, wow, this is a title and it's sort of an ego boost, but the best leaders recognize that it shouldn't be about them, it shouldn't be about me. So when we do something well, when we win an event, an alliance event, I'm not saying like, look at what we did and it was under my leadership. It's you're calling out the guys who made it happen, the OCMs and others who worked hard, who grinded all day and all night to make that win possible. And so every event, I try to call out 3 or 4 or 5 people, ideally non-leadership people, to say, "Hey, great job! Look at so and so. Let's thank them for their hard work." You say it, more fun than that. Other you don't want to be robotic, but as much as you can, you're trying to serve the people in your alliance rather than have it be all about you. If that's the type of leadership you have in place, I think you can avoid the problems that Kirk brought up, because he's right. There are definitely pitfalls to this kind of a structure, but if you do it right, it can work out pretty well.
I think it's a structure and a culture too that we've had a lot of time to build. And we've had our problems, we've had our failures and pitfalls, and it didn't break us. We analyzed it and said, okay, how do we not fucking do that ever again? And when you have so many people that have been with you for so long, and you get buy-in on your team structure concept and the culture that you put in place, that it makes everything easier, and also makes it more rewarding when you are the leader.
I think another good point to bring up too would be that the people in those positions, they need to be people who can drop things and address stuff in the game. And that's why I make the joke all the time, like with some of my friends IRL. I'm a Freemason, and a lot of people are like, oh, you go to the lodge, have you gone to the meetings and stuff like that? And there's a joke amongst this to say I'm not retired, and it's not a jab at people that are retired, but it's just that people who don't have a lot of obligations have more time on their hands. And so a lot of these people, they mean well, but if you're going to be MIA for the vast majority of the day, I mean, honestly and truthfully, some people might be able to make it work, but you really don't need to be in a leadership position. I mean, yeah, we know it's a game. We know it's something that it's just something we enjoy doing. And at the end of the day, when we strip it all away, we know that none of this is serious. If the game was taken down tomorrow, our lives would go on. But when you start talking about that, you need people who can address things. I mean, Handy owns his own business. So, Handy's in a leadership position. So because he owns his own business, he does have the majority of the time the ability to at least take maybe a couple minutes to hop on the phone or whatever and try to address a concern, or at least acknowledge that a complaint has been received, or that, some things are being discussed, and then able to get back to work. But, if you work in a place like a corporate setting or something like that, where people are, keeping a more close eye on you, or if you're doing a job that requires more hands-on throughout the day, you don't have that kind of time. It's probably not the spot for you. So when you start talking about choosing who's in a leadership position, as someone who has been a leader, both in game and out of game, that's the thing. You have to find somebody who's going to be able to dedicate the time. You can have all the drive and the passion in the world for this game, but if you don't have the time to dedicate to it, it doesn't amount to anything, because you're not able to respond to things in a timely manner before things blow up. And we know for a fact that things can go from a dry hit to a war in a matter of 15 minutes. So I mean, these things it's very real. It happens all the time. And so, you have to have someone who's able to be reached quickly, who's able to respond quickly. If, like I say, if nothing else, if for nothing else, then to just say, hey, we know what's up. I've sent everybody a message and tagged them all in on Discord and AC. I've told everybody to leave your guys alone. We're going to get this figured out. Just, I'm in the middle of something. Once I break free from this and I get a few minutes, I'm going to jump on a voice chat and we're going to handle it. You got to be able to do that. The people that are like, oh, I'm at work, I can't play the game between 7 and 9 throughout the day because, work and family time. And that's fine. That means you're better than most people because you're putting your priorities first. However, that means you shouldn't be a Commodore. You shouldn't be an Admiral. You should just be a player, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Kirk. I mean, I think I would say this, that there are specific roles that you can have somebody who's in a more traditional work, sort of work schedule, but not, as you said, there's hit complaints roles. There's certainly not Admiral. There's a lot of positions where you can't. But one of the things that I've always found is sort of a key to getting people motivated is giving them positions and giving them titles best you can, and then giving them the authority to move those things forward, and empowering them to do it. So I do like to try to assign roles and responsibilities best I can, and there are positions that you can develop that can allow someone like that to be active, to be involved, even if they're only available. One of our Commodores is pretty much only available at nights. So we've given him a specific role that works perfectly for that. I know before, actually, we had somebody who was only available at nights, and we actually created a role focused on raiding, to scout and open bases and help people get resources overnight, since it's one of the best times to raid. So there, if you look for those opportunities where someone who's available in the morning, only in mornings, well then they can be really helpful for events, especially alliance events. The most action you see is going to be in those last few hours as everyone's trying to vault the other alliance for better rewards. So someone who maybe is only playing on mornings might be perfect for a role like that. So you kind of look for, yes, ideally you have people who are available anytime, when you need them. And there are 3 or 4 roles where you need somebody like that, otherwise it won't succeed. But there are other roles where you can find a position for someone who maybe only has specific hours available for a game.
Yeah, I mean, I can get behind that. I do think it's important to note, though, that if somebody's going to be a Commodore, the core of what you do, your role that you're assigned, is always going to be in addition to essentially handling complaints, because you can't say, oh, the complaints only go to this person. Okay, well, what if that person's busy? It's going to have to fall on someone else, and someone else is going to have to handle it. You can't, again, we've seen where you can't have a complaint, and you send a complaint, and, guy's on vacation, and he's not going to be back, or she's not going to be back until 3 days from now. Well, then people's miners are going to get blown up, and there's going to be a bunch of salty buttholes. So, like I said, when it comes down to that stuff, that's why I say, it gets pretty complicated. But do you have the Commodores? Is that their basic role, or do they always supposed to forward complaints to the appropriate person and just wait until that person comes back online?
So first, I want to point out that Salty Buttholes sounds like an excellent name for a band. So well done on that.
They're from Tacoma, Washington.
There you go. No, I mean, we do have specific people in those roles. I don't want to say that our experience is the same as everybody's. I mean, being the biggest alliance in the server, if it takes us 3 hours to resolve your complaint versus 3 minutes, you're not going to declare war on us. So, I certainly will allow for the fact that maybe our structure isn't going to work for everybody. But I know when we have complaints with somebody else, as long as someone says like, "Hey, we're going to get on this," we're okay. We'll wait until you resolve it, unless it's something egregious. So I think, I do think the structure works. You have one person specifically in charge of hit complaints for the Alliance. We have a premier who's specifically aligned to assisting. So if that person isn't around, the premier can take it. And then the third, the backstop is the admiral. I mean, that's, if I can't get a hold of our guy, he's busy, then yeah, I have to handle it. But what we don't want, because oftentimes, PMs are the worst part of this game. You just don't want people who aren't skilled in handling situations or being diplomatic, talking to other alliances and having those conversations. That's where most problems get hurt. That's where most buttholes get salty, if I use your analogy. And so I would rather it be handled more slowly, but handled appropriately, than handled fast, but possibly somebody makes a stupid mistake that leads to those larger problems. And if it means some miners get blown up for a while, what's Pixels, get over it.
Well, that's the point I was making. I'm sure Handy can weigh on this, but I mean, we are the biggest. I am a member of the biggest alliance in the server, and one of the larger alliances probably throughout the game at this point. And I have, like I said, I use the example of 10 to 15 minutes. I've seen it happen in our alliance, and I'm sure Handy would remember specifics. But I've seen stuff escalate like that because something wasn't addressed as quickly as possible, or there was some sort of confusion or something like that. I mean, I have seen wars get declared. I go to the bathroom to take a dump, and I come back, and next thing I know, there's red dots floating around our TC.
9 times out of 10, it's because the wrong person tried to deal with the issue.
Why do I feel like you're all talking?
So that
about
brings
me?
that would beg the bigger then I guess that would bring about a bigger discussion, and I guess the bigger picture would be, why would we appoint anyone as a Commodore that's not level-headed.
Level-headed, I'd agree with, but I will say people have different skills in life and in game.
Exactly.
if
Each comm serves a different role. So you can have a comm that may not be level-headed when it comes to, or not level-headed, but I would choose a different word.
Diplomatic.
Maybe doesn't put up with bullshit, has not a short fuse, but when they see some other player acting like an ass on purpose, they're going to call them out on it and not back down, which isn't very diplomatic. But those particular comms may have a different role for the alliance. Like that's not what they do. They're not the diplomat, right?
I'm speaking from a point of if
But
I'm
if nobody else is on, they'll step up.
if I'm a player and I have an issue and I go to your page and I search by people by rank and I pick somebody and send them a message. When stuff like that happens, you also look at perception, because everybody likes to talk about diplomacy, but part of diplomacy, what people don't understand, is that you have to, I use the term manipulate, not necessarily in a bad way, but you have to be able to manipulate the way that you're perceived, because if you have a Commodore that does that, and we've seen it happen, where there have been conflicts that have been started because the response is what started it, not the complaint. It's the response to that complaint is what started it. And it could have been completely avoided if people would have essentially just taken their dick out of their hand and put it away and spoken to somebody like a normal human being. So we've seen that happen. And so when you start talking about how everybody else perceives you, to me, that's what I'm looking at, is that if I'm going to an alliance and I say, oh, this person's a Commodore, and then they handle it poorly, and then later on it's, that person, they're not really good at that. To me and to the layperson, they're going to be like, man, you're pretty shit at choosing your leadership. So if they have a particular role that has to do with the coordination of this or that or the other, perhaps maybe another title would be better for them rather than naming them as a Commodore. So that way the confusion doesn't exist.
If we only had Commodores that were 100% level-headed 100% of the time and never reacted poorly to any situation, we would have no comms.
Yeah, I mean the problem is you're losing other people. I mean, I look through our Commodores and they all have different personalities and skill sets, and I certainly most of them I wouldn't have in a room in a tough diplomatic situation. But also, I'm going to use those personalities to my advantage. I got OCM here with us, and he has a specific personality. So there are certain rooms where, yeah, I wouldn't have OCM in that room, and he knows, and he wouldn't want to be in it, frankly. But sometimes diplomatically, you need the hammer in the room. And so there have been specific times where, we put OCM in that room, and we accept that maybe the room will blow up and maybe it won't, but he's the perfect guy to be in that room at that time. And the rest of our Commodores, the rest of our leaders are trained when someone contacts them to say, hey, so-and-so is the person you should talk to. Let me see if I can help you get in contact with them. So they don't handle those situations because, yes, we have specific people who handle it, who are good at that sort of thing. And I don't want to lose talent. I mean, I've got, if I look through our Commodores, I would say less than half of them are the types who are, more diplomatic or able to handle a diplomatic situation. But those people, like this alliance would not function if we didn't have those people doing the things that they are good at. So if if you're lucky and all your people are level-headed and diplomatic, like I'm not going to turn that down. That's awesome. But I think, looking at sort of the players that you've got available to you, the vast majority of them are not skilled in sort of diplomacy and relations. You wish they were, and maybe you try to train them. To Kirk's point, the more that are, the better. But until that point, if they're trained to just not handle those situations, to pass it off to the person or people who do, you can have your cake and eat it too here, where you get the best of both worlds.
Well, you'll have, and I can use myself as an example. We recently had a conflict, and I sort of volunteered. Somebody else also came up with the idea as well, sort of in parallel to what I was doing, but it's not anything new. But we kept having this conversation, conflict with this group, and And I said, hey, I have a reputation for being honest. I'm openly critical about some of the things that my own alliance does. I don't mind, and I'm also at the same time, my alliance doesn't tell me to shut up or not say those things. And I'm sure Handy, it frustrates him at times, and Inko and some of these other people, that I may be openly critical about some of the things. And when I say openly critical, I mean I flat out, anyway. There's even I could probably go a better way about doing it. However, because of that brutal honesty, for anything that I see, I call it like I see it, and again, just my opinion is just an observation. But there's never going to be a bias. I'm never going to lean one way or the other. If somebody's doing something wrong and they're on my team, I'll be like, yeah, man, you're a moron. Why did you do that? That type of thing. But so my point is that I do have a particular skill set. In real life for 10 years, I was an actual trained negotiator, and that's what I did. So I was able to use that and try to build some bridges and that may have been burned at some point and open some discussions and everything like that. And man, I'm not going to sit here and take credit for all of it because obviously there was great effort put in by all parties involved. However, I do like to think that what I did helped, and speaking to people and talking to people and hey, let's have this conversation and calling people out on both sides and this, that, and the other. And so I do have this particular skill set. However, I'm not a Commodore. Side note, I also don't want to be a Commodore, and I don't expect to be one. I haven't been here near long enough, but that's so the point. The only point that I'm making, I see what you're saying, and absolutely. However, what I'm also saying is that the other way works as well, because at the end of the day, though I'm not a Commodore and I don't have any sort of title, nor do I care about one, I recognize the fact that my opinion is respected, it is acknowledged, and I've seen it, and the leadership, Handy and the other Commodores and Admiral Inko, they all definitely make it a point to acknowledge what I say, talk to me about it, discuss it, and actually listen to what I have to say, especially if I'm being openly critical. And oftentimes, good things come of it. And I think that to your point about, making people feel recognized and all this stuff like that, I need to have a title. I could just be listed as an agent. But the fact of the matter is that I know that the leadership in my alliance listens to what I have to say. They may not agree with it, but they at least listen to what I have to say. And to me, that is more important than any title. If people feel like they're heard, to me, that's more important. You'll find that that's going to be more important than someone having a title or someone having some sort of a power over someone else. And I think you'll find that in real life as much as in this game. If people genuinely feel like you are listening, you don't necessarily have to do what they're saying to suggest, but you're listening and discussing with them and opening the conversation. I think that works as well.
Yeah, I think you're making a great point. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an either or situation. I mean, you want both if you can. But I guess what I would say is this: there's multiple ways you could run a successful alliance, and the best advice that I give to other admirals and that I would even say here is pick a lane. Like pick what you want to do, pick how you want to structure, and then pursue that. And if it's the structure you're saying, Kirk, awesome, like go for it, but own it. Like I think where people make the mistake and where alliances make the mistake is they try to do a little bit of everything. We're going to be a bit of this, a bit of that. Figure out what you want your culture to be, what you want your structure to be. And if it's the structure you're talking about, Kirk, or the structure we've pursued, like we're not so naive to think that the way we do it is the only way to do it. Take what you've seen other alliances do well and build out your own structure, your own process, your own culture. But whatever it is, be intentional about it. Make that how you want to move forward so that your players know what to expect. I think that's the biggest thing is when your players know what to expect. Maybe there's positives about it and maybe there's negatives about it, but at least they know what to expect so they can get on and game when they want and they don't have to worry about like it's going to change or what should I expect. If you're intentional about it and you're clear about it, I think there's multiple structures that could work, and yours sounds like it absolutely could work great.
So consistency and structure, I think, should be the big takeaway from this sort of conversation debate.
Communication huge.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So
I think the longer you have an alliance, the more longevity it has, especially if it's been successful and it doesn't have a huge leadership turnover rate. That you develop a culture. Now, you can develop we've all seen those alliances. There's alliances that develop bad cultures, and it impacts them negatively or leads to their downfall. But when you have the longevity, you have players who've been there for a while, you've had consistent, confident leadership, you build a culture. So when new people do come into your alliance, they see that culture because everybody's going in the same direction instead of an alliance where everybody's just doing their own thing and leadership team is just running around pissing out fires, cleaning up messes. Because there's some awesome players on our server that came over to us, got recruited or asked to join, and it just wasn't for them. Our structure, they chafed at the culture, or they felt they didn't have the activity level, or whatever, and they moved on. And it wasn't a negative. They just kind of self-selected and said, these guys may be successful, but this isn't my brand of fun.
How important do you think, Zarseem, and of course Handy can always chime in here, how important do you think at the end of the day that whereas you value the input from your Commodores and so forth, how important do you think it is that your alliance understands that at the end of the day, ultimately, the sort of tiebreaker or the decision is ultimately going to rest on the top leadership? Like, that's great that you all think that, but you know what? I'm calling it, and I'm making this decision, and this is the way we're going to do. How important do you think that they understand that there are going to be certain times, we've seen it in our alliance, where there's just a command decision. In other words, where it's just like, this is what we're going to do. We hear what you're saying, but we're not going to do that. We're doing this. This is the way we need to go. And people may kind of grumble a little bit, but people get behind it and they understand they got to do what they got to do. How important do you think it is?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think I kind of look at it as a bank. You were absolutely right that you've got to listen, and I think the more that you listen, the more you fill up that bank with opportunities to make a command decision when you need to, and not lose people along the way. So if you're just constantly making command decisions and there's no opportunity for input, you're not listening to other people, you're going to lose people. It's just going to feel like and look like more of a dictatorship. But the more that you can delegate, and when there's opportunities for even others to make a decision where you don't even pipe in, and then certainly the more that you listen to people, the more you earn those opportunities. We just had an event where, to be honest, the final decision on how we handled that event was not going to make or break our alliance. And I viewed it as a perfect opportunity to, put out the facts and then let the Commodores debate and then let them make the decision. If it was a tie, I would jump in and break the tie. But ultimately, it was not the high level command type decision. And it would have saved me a lot of time and all of us a lot of heartache if I just said, here's what we're doing, let's move on with our day, instead of it being a day or 2 day long debate. But you give your Commodores those opportunities. You give your players those opportunities to sort of debate and make a decision and feel like they were part of it. That earns you that opportunity where there is a tough decision and someone needs to step up and make the decision. Yeah, that's got to be you as the Admiral. And because we listen in the other situations, as you said, there's going to be some grumbling. But as people will come along and as they see the benefits, they'll realize that yes, that was the decision that needed to be made. But I think you earn those opportunities by the way you run your alliance.
Handy's definitely, Handy can speak to it, and so I'm not going to speak for him because I wasn't there. But Handy, I know for a fact that he and Inko definitely ran into a very similar situation recently, where unfortunately over the past couple months they kind of had to make some command decisions, and then this other thing came up, and they were all for it, but there was sort of a large number of people were against it, so they kind of, it seemed like, and Handy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like they kind of had to weigh, like, well, we've been kind of dictating a little bit, so we really need to just let this one ride. This isn't, we can't just, we gotta let it go a little bit.
Yeah, that's accurate.
So and luckily I was able to involve the it involved the issue with this other alliance that I was speaking about, and I explained it to him as such. I felt pretty confident in being able to explain. I said, look, all the stuff that's been going on, there's been a lot of command decisions made, and it's at this point, it's this is what it is. And of course, that leadership also, they say, oh yeah, I mean, we've been in situations like that as well. So I think ultimately, people that are, I would say, serious alliances, and I say that not to put down some of the smaller alliances, but generally your smaller alliances are going to be more casual type players, and that's kind of what they are. But I'd say the more serious alliances, the more serious players, they will be. I'll tell you what. I'll rephrase that. I will use more active players. I think that everybody kind of understands that that's just a universal truth in any alliance, that you can make some of those decisions, like you say, but it's like a bank. You can't make a withdrawal every day. You got to bank some of those decisions.
Yeah, I mean, you always have opportunities for that, and sometimes you miss it. I know one of our biggest regrets is an opportunity that came our way that we didn't make a command decision. There was, some people grumbling, some people not happy about what could have been done, and we didn't take the opportunity. But I think the reason why we didn't is we hadn't filled up the bank enough where we could have made that decision and not lost not only players but even Commodores. So I think that sometimes those opportunities arise and you're not ready for them, and you just, as you guys kind of had to do, you just let it ride. There'll be another opportunity in the future, but you're not ready. You're not in a position to make that kind of decision. So yeah, it definitely is about knowing your moments, picking your moments, but the more you can be ready for that moment. You can't control timing. You don't know when that opportunity is going to come along. So ideally, you try to make sure you always have enough in the bank so that if you have to make a controversial decision, you can in that moment. Otherwise, you might miss a big opportunity.
Yeah, I get behind that.
I think there's also
Basically,
a lot.
choose your battles.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot in how when you have to make those decisions that might disgruntle some of your player base. If you just give a command fiat and say we're going to do this or we're not going to do this anymore because I said so, you're losing a great opportunity. Whereas if you say, hey, we're going to do this now, or we're not going to do this thing anymore, and here's the reasons why, here's how we arrived at this decision, you kind of lay out your commander's intent and say, you lift the veil behind why the leadership decision was made, and instead of playing I got a secret, and you just say, hey, these are the second and third order consequences that we as leadership had to consider when making this decision, and ultimately we're weighing them pretty heavily, and that's why this decision's been made. Some people are still going to be a little disgruntled if they still wanted to do that thing or didn't want to stop doing that thing, but it smooths the waters a little bit, at least if they know why.
Let me ask you this. When do you get to that point where you decide to let everybody else know about, breaking the fourth wall or revealing the veil? Because when you get to a point, and I've experienced this, when you get to a point where leadership decides everything and doesn't say anything whatsoever, and shit just happens. At what point do you decide that, hey, I think we need to roll this back a little bit and actually talk with the rest of our players?
Yeah, it's a good question. So a quote that I overuse, but since this is the first time we're all talking, it'll be the first time you hear it from me, so that's exciting. But it's if you're wrong in the way that you're right, you're wrong, even if you're right. And I think it's a something that we kind of operate by, which is you may make the right decision, but if you go about it the wrong way, it's going to be viewed as and treated as the wrong decision. So as much as you can, you try to communicate to your players, this is why we did that. But to your point, Tech, and we just had a situation like this where we had to make a decision that wasn't necessarily overly popular with every player, and we'll probably never be able to fully explain it to them because there are so many layers and diplomatic relations with other alliances alliances, and things where if we talked through everything that went into this decision, it cost us players, it cost us alliances, it cost us allies, because there are things you take into account that led to this decision that we can't ever say. So there are certain times where you're going to have to make decisions where you just cannot go into it in depth, at least not fully explain every aspect of why you arrived at that decision, because they're just things that you can't say. They're the private things. So I think there are times where those decisions have to be made, where you have to accept that if there are going to be consequences, this is still the right decision. If it costs us players, if it leads to X problems, this is still the right decision, even if that's the case. A different situation recently where we had to let go of a really popular player, and it was the right decision, even if it meant we were going to lose some players or have some people who were disgruntled. We were willing to accept the negative consequences because it was the right decision, and I think that's what you always go back to. So, Tech, to answer your question, if you go back and you start to question, was it the right decision? Then yes, maybe that's a moment where you walk it back, or maybe that's a moment where you're honest with your players and say, we did the best we could with the information we had in front of us. Looking back, it was wrong. There will be those moments. But if in your head, looking back, that decision was still right, it just didn't end up being popular, or maybe it didn't play out. Not every decision is a black and white situation. You might have a 51-49 situation where you pick the path that's 51% most likely to be correct, but that means it's a 49% chance it's not going to be correct. And you just have to accept as a leader that, what, you did the best you could with what you had, and it might end up still being wrong. But if you come back to communication and honesty, and you're willing to say to your players, we did the best we could, it ended up being wrong, we're sorry, we'll learn from it and we'll do better. That level of humanity really endears you to your players. Those moments where you say, I screwed up, or hey, listen, we did the best we could, we're trying. When you're, instead of acting like you're infallible as a leader, moments where you show your humanity, to be honest, almost inspire more loyalty than those people who say and quote unquote always are 100% right.
I think I was more asking about the nature by which you talk to your alliance members about some of these decisions that are made, as opposed to, understanding that the complexity of some decisions lead to various different outcomes. It's more of a, Kirk was saying this earlier, right? He goes to take a dump, comes back, they're at war. Like, what the fuck happened, right? And there's been a few situations where I come back to AC and all of a sudden there's red dots and people are screaming in AC over nonsensical kind of things, and you're like, wait, what? Can someone explain what happened? What is going on? And then all of a sudden, like, yeah, this thing happened, so now we're fighting these people, and you're like, at some point there's a level of disengagement between the leadership and the rest of the player base. Now, I get after a certain point, after playing the game a long time, you kind of understand the habits and patterns of your leadership and the players that you play with because you're with them for a long time. But, for people that play in alliances where you don't necessarily have that sort of structure, or the structure is the admiral does everything, or the structure where only the top 3 dudes really do all the work and everybody else suffers for it. It's just a question about at what point does the leadership, or of a requirement of leadership to talk with everybody in the player base to say, this is how we've thought through things, this is why we're doing it, we want your input for the next round or this round or whatever.
Yeah. So I think a couple things to that. One, you need a communication tool. I mean, we use Discord, and I know a lot of people use Discord, and that allows you to get information out and have it not be lost in the scroll of AC. But I think the way that we approach it is no one person Even Admiral makes a decision without at least talking it through with other leaders. That way, at least you've got some check to that because people have bad days, they have emotional days, and you don't want the opportunity to have new red dots because your admiral or someone in leadership had a bad day and someone called them a name or said something bad about them. So you got to have sort of those layers, and then you also have a process. So when we make a decision, we inform our commodores, even if the commodores weren't part of that decision, because sometimes yes, you have to take it to a higher level, but you need those people to be able to take it to the players. And so if they can't understand the decision and they're questioning and grumbling, you got a problem. And so you need to bring that decision to your comms and make sure they know what's going on. And if they need to vent, let them vent there. Have a specific leadership channel. Let them vent. Let them get it out of their system. That way, when a player asks a question, they can then present sort of what the group decision was, and they don't feel like they've been slighted in that situation. And then, as much as we can, if it's a major decision, we'll do a at everyone tag in Discord and put the full explanation in there, so that people are aware of what's happening and why it's happening. So if we declare war on someone, if it's a major alliance, or there's a decision made, or anything at a higher level, we want to first make sure all of our leadership gets it and is on the same page, and then second, we put out the official position and the reasoning to everyone in the alliance. And then there's going to be chatter in AC, there's going to be questions, there's going to be back and forth, but then as leaders, you kind of look at who are those players who might be unhappy about it or might have further questions, and then you shoot them a PM or a Discord message, and you say, hey, what's your concerns, let me hear you out. But the more you can get those conversations privately, they feel more comfortable because they're going to open up more privately. They also feel grateful that you reached out directly to them, to hear them out. So, because if you just say, you're right, you want to give people an opportunity to give feedback, but if you just say, hey, people give feedback, they're not going to jump in AC. At least most won't. Sounds like Kirk is the type who'd be willing to jump in and say it in front of everyone, which I'd prefer. But most people, they're going to just privately sort of steam or grumble, or maybe in their little group of friends, share their unhappiness, and that's going to spiral. So you got to identify who those players are who might be unhappy and try to get them, to open up to you privately. That's generally the best way to do it. OCM, what am I missing here?
I mean, we don't run things by committee. I mean, in some ways, we have an expansive leadership team because we're talking, close to 300 players. So we have a group of commodores, and then we have an admiralty. But especially when things are time sensitive, and especially if there's not a clear consensus among leadership, we'll put things up for an alliance-wide vote. We'll say, hey, speak your mind, vote on this. We'll let the majority take this. And as leaders, you have to be. I mean, my alliance has voted on things, and I was like, you guys got to be shitting me. We're letting them off the hook, or we're going to change that rule to what, or, but you got to accept that. Hey, my job is to represent you, not dictate to you. Now you can overplay that hand and put everything up for a vote, and you've got mob rule, and then leadership becomes so cumbersome. I mean, we've messed alliances up because they did something and we had a complaint and we filed it with them, and they were like, all right, we're going to get into this. And a couple days goes by, we're like, hey, what's going on? Oh, well, we're still discussing it. 3 days later, they're still discussing it, and we're like, you know what, we're going to give you another option. We're just going to go ahead and mark you red now. And they're like, well, we couldn't get all of our leadership on, we were still talking about it, people had weighed in, blah, blah, blah. If you set your alliance up that way, that's your shortcoming, not ours. Now that's an extreme case. We've only done that a few times, but it has happened.
Yeah, I mean, you want to be a republic, not a democracy, and ultimately, you've got people who have stepped up in positions of leadership. They're investing time into the game that the average player is not, and they're not playing. They're in Discord, or they're dealing with whatever their role is. There has to be some reward for that. And in many cases, that's being in the room when decisions are made and having your voice heard. And so sometimes, when I've got a player who's like, well, I wanted to be heard on this, I'll explain that to him. And I'll say, hey, listen, I'd love for you to. We're always looking for people to step up to be leaders. Here's a role we have open. Are you willing to step up? Most of the time, the answer is no. I don't have the time, or, I'm not really interested. And I say, that's great. I'm not going to force you, but please understand that the people who are going to make these high level decisions are the people who are going to fill these roles who put in that extra time. So if you just want to have fun, I love that. I'm glad you're here, but then please don't be unhappy when those people who have stepped up into leadership need to make a decision. That's part of what comes with leadership. And I think the more that people understand that, they realize it's a trade-off. Do I want to be in the room to make these decisions? But on the flip side, do I want to have to make these decisions? And most people don't want to put in that level of work.
All right, let's do. Let's wrap this up because it's getting to the holiday times, and this will probably be the last episode for the next 2 weeks, just because not many people are going to be online or listening or care about being on a show during the holidays with their families. So, Handy, you got a final question that we want to go out with a bang on?
Not that I can think of. I mean, I think. Well, I'll just kind of conclude and just say that everybody's points that they've made are all pretty accurate and exactly how leadership works. So, if anybody is curious how your leadership works and operates, you heard it here. I mean, that's exactly what it is.
All right, Zars, Occams, you have any advice for like mid-tier alliances, either on your server or other servers, to help improve their gameplay?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I get that question a lot from admirals of some of the smaller and medium-sized alliances of how do they grow. I mean, we grew ours. We had some advantages to do so, but we grew ours from, like I said, bottom of the power ranking to the top. The thing I say is start with one thing: own a space. We're at the level we are now, and we can have the leadership structure we have now because we're the top alliance. We couldn't do that right away. And so the number one thing for an alliance that's maybe middle level of power or even low is find a space you can own, a place that you could be really, really good at something as an alliance. It could be something as simple or as small as being great scouts. I mean, we've got one alliance they're incredible at scouting. And frankly, that's a resource to all the big alliances. We reach out to them and ask, hey, do you know where so-and-so is? And so it doesn't have to be something big, but it could be raiding. It could be participation style events. It could be this. Pick something that allows you to build a culture around it. It allows you to build an identity, and it allows you to be, even if you're sacrificing some other things where maybe you're not investing in it as much, but be great at something, because it gives people a reason to know who you are, to care who you are, and that'll get you recruits and allow you to start to build up. And then you can pick a second thing or a third thing that you want to be great at. But that's always the advice that I give to some of our medium level alliances. And there's one right now that's growing gangbusters, and I'm pretty proud of it. And they did that. They picked one thing, they got really, really good at it, and they've jumped. They've jumped 15 alliances in the rankings over the last few months. So it works, and it's hard to say like we're not going to be great at these other 8 things right now, but it really helps you make a name for yourself and start to grow something bigger than what you have now.
I would just say that we've laid out our structure and how we do it, and we've been very successful at it, and that's a way, not the way. I think that the best thing is build a positive culture in your alliance. Figure out who it is you want to be, what you want to represent, what do you want to be about, what your standards of behavior are, and get rid of the people that aren't on board with that and bring in people that can buy into that. And you got a happy alliance.
Handy, any sage advice?
No.
Good. My sage advice is don't take the game too seriously. Even the people that spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on this game, don't take it too seriously. It's only a game. It shouldn't be a substitute for things that you have going on in real life. And on that note, I want to thank everybody for listening today. I think this has been a good chat with leashes and We had all sorts of funny. What was that band? Oh, Kirk's not here. It's like, what was that band in Tacoma's name again?
Was it
Sorry.
Salty Buttholes.
Salty
There you
Buttholes?
go. There you go.
We talked about leashes and nipple clamps and salty buttholes. I think this was a pretty successful discussion.
And then in the green room, we were talking about Andorian Klingon relations. And then Occam's is gonna watch Deep Space Nine and figure out the money shot on the spoon. Anyways, I want to thank you guys for coming back. Occam's and Zars, you're more than welcome to come back anytime. And please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment. It helps with the algorithm. Listen to us on all the podcast platforms available and YouTube. Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back next year. Have a wonderful winter break, Christmas, New Year's. Have fun times with your families. Enjoy life. Don't get too wrapped up in the game. I'm Techman16.
And I'm Strange Handy.
And we'll see you guys in 2022.